There we go. We are recording.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mary and Kelly, for having me. Let me share my screen quickly. Get up and running.
A little bit of background. Operations Hub should be able to provide you some operational efficiency and sustainable growth and a smooth customer experience. So whether this is your first look at Operations Hub or you've already implemented, this is a great time to learn some more and ask some questions. Ari is the principal product manager at HubSpot. He's been there for 10 years and he's worked on everything from customer technical issues to strategic inbound consulting, and works on the product team to figure out what to build next to help customers get a great experience out of HubSpot. So with that, Ari, I'm giving it off to you.
Mary, thank you. What an amazing intro. That was much more impressive than I am in real life, but I hope we have a good hour together. I wanted to kick it off. I'll introduce myself in just a second, but a quick icebreaker question on the topic of the Packers. I also just want to make sure the chat pane works. We're keeping an eye on that the whole time. I've actually never been to Green Bay, but I aspire, one of the people on my team goes for the opening day at Lambeau Field every year. So if assuming I'm somebody who's never been to a Packers game, best pro tip for attending a Packers game, maybe like a secret hidden gem around Lambeau, the spot to sit, the place to tailgate. Oh, Nicole says take time for tailgating. Okay, Nicole, what time do people, if there's a 1 o'clock game or a noon game, what time do people show up in the parking lot for tailgating? Dare I ask? 5 hours early, 8 a.m. All right. I had a lot of good friends who went to Badger games in University of Wisconsin-Madison, and yeah, they would start at like 5 or 6 a.m. That sounds right. Day prior, says Nicole. Camp out, park in the adjacent neighborhood and walk over. Way cheaper. We used to do that when we would go to Fenway Park games. They charge $50 for parking. You park up the street in Brookline. You can walk down. Get a burger at Kroll's. Wear Packer gear. Shuttles, 3 hours at least for a Packers game. Free parking 3 blocks away. Yeah, I aspire to have one of those. Matt said wear Packers gear. The cheese heads, I aspire to have one of those. Those are so cool. Anything else? Maybe let's get one more. Any other pro tips for attending a Packers game? Keith says for 3 hours after the win. So you get there at 8 a.m., you tailgate for 5 hours, and then you wait through the game, and then you tailgate another 3 hours after the game. Come to experience inbound next year. Oh, Keith has a drinking problem, says Greg. That seems right. Yeah, I feel like every region, we have a couple Buffalo Bills fans in our midst at HubSpot, and they show up, they tailgate, and they jump off RVs and break tables. Like they jump off an RV onto a portable table and snap it in half. We're not quite that intense in New England. We're very spoiled. I'm a Patriots fan through and through, but this is amazing. Thank you. Most Wisconsinites fall into that category. That's the Bears. These are all great tips. Thank you for responding in the chat. This is the kind of vibe we're going for throughout. Keep the questions coming about Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, but also about HubSpot and Operations Hub. And we'll take it from there. Some other questions just to drop in the chat. Is this your first HubSpot user group? Have you been here before? Answer in the chat. James has been here before. He's a seasoned veteran. James has been tailgating this HubSpot user group for the last 3 hours out in the parking lot. Kelly's been here before, of course, from the beginning of time. First one. Welcome, Colton. We're glad to have you here. Cigar says first one. Keith says not my first rodeo. Well, welcome back for the veterans. Welcome to your first one. We're glad to have you. For the folks who are new, maybe a question to veterans, I'm curious to see your answers, and also for the newer folks. How long have you been using HubSpot, our product? Drop your answer in the chat. I'll answer as we go. I think Mary had mentioned I've been at HubSpot for 10 years, which is wild. So I've been using HubSpot. I think we were just a little blogging tool. Now we're a full CRM platform with many hubs. We were just a blogging tool when I started, and it was, oh, Greg's got me beat, 11 years. Yeah, Greg, I'm curious what HubSpot looked like when you started. It was, to put it kindly, I think it was actually not that, it was a little bit buggy back when we started 10 or 11 years ago. Christine, 199 days. Chelsea says 9 years. That's amazing. We got some real veterans here, some OGs of the HubSpot world, and also some newer folks. Stacy, almost 4 years. It was toucans in a string. Yeah, I think that's right. And that's putting it generously, toucans in a string. So, but we've come a long way, and you'll see that today. We've got some awesome new features. Then last question for the chat, on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident do you feel about Operations Hub? This is not a loaded question. If the answer is 1, that's totally great. I'm sure you're not alone, and we'll get you to a 10 today. Greg says 6. All right. Yeah, Chelsea, well before Hubs existed. Yeah, that sounds right. When it was just Marketing Hub, but it was just a software. A 3 from Jessica, 2, 2, 2. Nice. Honesty, transparency. Thank you for your vulnerability. We're going to get you up, maybe not to a 10, but at least to a 5 or a 6 in terms of knowing what's inside of it from a feature perspective. Chelsea says 4. Awesome. Cool. So we'll jump in. I guess we should let Greg teach. Yeah, that sounds right. Greg, of his 11 years of experience and a 10 out of 10 on Operations Hub. We'll get out of the way. Thank you for your engagement. We'll keep it that way. I think we've all been in so many Zoom meetings for the last 3 years that I don't want this to be one of those where I just talk at you for an hour and then we leave. So keep the questions coming, keep the ideas coming. I'll keep asking questions as we go to keep you on your toes, and we'll take it from there. Quick intro to me. I couldn't do any better than Mary already did, but I'm a principal marketing manager at HubSpot. I work at, it's called product marketing. So I work with the product team and also the marketing team on releasing the products. I have the fun thing about joining HubSpot 10 years ago is that every 5 years we have this amazing perk of a sabbatical, a month-long sabbatical where we can take work off and go wherever we choose. So I have my second sabbatical upcoming. Every 5 years you get it. So I'm taking suggestions. Wisconsin is definitely on my list, but it's some stiff competition for that month-long vacation upcoming for me. So any suggestions, definitely welcome. A little bit more just fun facts about me, since you all were so kind to share about yourselves. I grew up in Vermont. I was addicted to ice cream, which is a stereotype maybe of Vermonters because Ben & Jerry's was invented there, but you may find me at 9 a.m. this morning scooping straight out of the tub. No shame in that. I've hiked a bunch of mountains in New Hampshire, which is where my family is based now. I married my wife at City Hall in Boston in 2019. I spent 2 years working in the Dublin office for HubSpot. So we did some international projects over there and did a bunch of Ireland exploration. And then the last piece, which is the most important, is that I have roots in Wisconsin. So I mentioned my parents, maybe I didn't, but my parents attended UW, both for graduate school, and they met there and they got married there at the student union, like the third floor of the student union there with the cool chairs. So I've Wisconsin roots, been to a game at Camp Randall, have all the swag and all that kind of thing. So love Wisconsin. My wife's family is now based just over the border in Minnesota. She's a Minnesotan, Midwestern at heart. So just over the border right near Hudson, Wisconsin. So love Wisconsin. I'm glad to be here. Greg, I did not watch the game last night, but I'm curious to know what happened now. So if you feel like sharing, that's great. Go Badgers. I guess I should say go Badgers, but also was on a roll till I mentioned Minnesota. I'm torn because my whole wife's family is Gophers fans, but then my whole parents' side is Badgers fans. So when the Badgers play the Gophers, the Badgers usually win, so it's actually like easier. There's not as much drama on that. The Gophers, it's more of like a kind of a pity party, but I love both Wisconsin and Minnesota. All right, so jumping in, we're going to talk quickly about what Operations Hub, just high level, the context for it, who it's for. Then we're going to walk through the features, give some real use cases. I don't like just doing features without grounding it in something that's actually tangible. Talk through some best practices, and then open it up for Q&A. I think we probably have 25, 30 minutes of content here, depending on how many questions come up, and then we can open it up for questions about Ops Hub, about HubSpot, or anything else at the end. So to kick us off, Operations Hub, I think, it's a little bit different than our other hubs in that it doesn't have as defined a use case, I guess I would say. And part of it is because the persona looks a little bit different. Ops people look a little bit different everywhere you go. But at a high level, Operations Hub is all about supercharging HubSpot as a CRM. And it's all about data. So I say here, with more robust and flexible data management tools, it's enabling bigger, more complex data management inside of HubSpot as a platform. So the movement of data around the company, the movement of data between apps, the use of data around the company. So making data easier to use for everybody, marketers, sales reps, service people who are using the CRM. And then also making business processes go really smoothly in the CRM. So it's a little bit different from the other hubs in that it's not like a crazy standalone value like you might have email marketing in our marketing hub. Operations Hub is all about removing friction and kind of turbocharging the processes that exist in all the other hubs. It's built with ops professionals in mind, but it's also built with data leaders in mind and HubSpot admins in mind. So really anybody who manages the data in a HubSpot account, who runs the reports and so on. We often find at smaller companies that that's, for lack of a better term, it's the HubSpot person, the HubSpot champion, sometimes called like the HubSpot guy or the HubSpot girl, that's asked to build, connect, and fix everything for their company. So often at a smaller company, like ops doesn't exist. It's not a specialized function, but there's somebody who picks up the slack and does the HubSpot work. This tool is built for them. Ops Hub is built for them. And it's also built for the agency that more often than not owns the health and well-being of a client database. So if you do data work, you do integrations, you do reporting, you do automation, often that's the agency. HubSpot was built for that audience as well. Because the thing is, in talking to a lot of ops people, it's not a really well-defined role. It's a set of systems, processes, responsibilities that all businesses use and need, but it looks a little bit different. It's called something different depending on where you go. But at a high level, those tasks that we're talking about, regardless of whether you or your company call it ops, we divide those tasks into three big buckets. At HubSpot, we tend to like alliteration. For Greg, who's been around for 11 years, he's seen Brian Halligan, our former CEO, use a lot of alliteration up on stage at our inbound event. The three Ps we use to describe our operations topic areas or task areas are platform, process, and perspective. Platform is all about connecting data. How do we get every team the info they need? How do we get data in the right place, in the right apps, and get that elusive single source of truth? Process is all about, once you have that data in one place, how do you make it consistent and clean? How do you get it in front of people in the right way? You make it efficient and automated and streamlined. And then perspective, that final P, is all about using that data to drive business level strategy, right? So not just marketing strategy or like marketing assets, analytics, but real like business level intelligence. Platform, process, perspective are the task areas we think about for ops and for operations people. Those three Ps, as it turns out, are really hard to manage. And the people who tend to work with them, whether they're agencies, whether they're operations people with a specialized role, whether it's a marketer who picks it up in their day-to-day, like as a nights and weekends job, the people who own connecting data, automating it, reporting on it, tend to be underappreciated and overworked. And we want to live in a world where that's not the case, right? We want to live in a world where the people who own that backbone work, that kind of behind the scenes plumbing that makes everybody else's life easier with data, those people are strategic. Those people are valued and paid and seen and appreciated for what they're worth and the value that they're bringing. And that it's a real strategic priority to make operations run smoothly. Because at the end of the day, the customer experience is rooted in that back-end internal operation. Right? So that's what Operations Hub is all about. It's about helping those people who do the data work behind the scenes to do it efficiently, so that the business can run smoothly and the customer experience at the end of the day can be friction-free as well. That's what Operations Hub is rooted in. Three Ps that we have for operations task areas: platform, process, perspective. Platform, process, perspective, right? Three Ps. We're going to walk through each one of those individually and the features that build up to those in Operations Hub. And I'll do a quick little kind of 1-minute demo within each to situate you as HubSpot users, especially for the newer folks, into where to actually find these things in the app, and maybe a thing or two to do with them along the way. That first piece is platform. Platform, the summary here is to use data sync to integrate HubSpot with over 100 apps and eliminate data silos. So the context here, a bit of a history lesson for folks who have been around HubSpot for longer. You may know the backstory on data sync. 2 years ago, or maybe 3 years ago now, in 2019, we bought a company called PieSync. PieSync is based in Belgium, amazing company, amazing team. They're actually the top ranked industry leading integration engine on G2 Crowd. So if you're familiar with G2, their software rankings, they rank all kinds of categories. PieSync was the leader in integrations, up there with, for folks who are familiar with Zapier. Zapier is another integration platform. PieSync and Zapier were the two leaders in that category. So HubSpot bought this company, PieSync, and we integrated their technology into the back end of our system. So what that means is that it powers all of our native integrations now. So for the most part, if you set up an integration through HubSpot, it's powered by this industry-leading system. The way that those integrations stand out, what makes them different from your traditional, typical CRM integrations is 4 things. One is that they're two-way. So the traditional integration is, it's more often one directional. So it goes from, like if you set up a Zap in Zapier, something happens in HubSpot, it triggers something to happen in Microsoft Dynamics. It's one way. The second piece is it's customizable. So often integrations that you set up they're static. You set it up and it's designed to do one thing and one thing only. These are custom. You can decide which fields go in which direction, in both directions, and so on. Third is that it's real time. Oftentimes integrations run in jobs overnight, that kind of thing. These integrations that we built based on this old PieSync, this legacy PieSync engine, are real time. And the last is that they're historical. So for the folks who are just getting started with HubSpot for the first time, if you plug in these data sync integrations, they pull past data as well. So a lot of people use this instead of like an import from a CSV. If they're moving from another system onto HubSpot, you just set up data sync and all your past data syncs right away. It's super easy. Coming soon, this is a little insight into what's coming next. Sync health, so we're going to do more to expose the health of the sync, which records are passing errors, which ones are moving healthily. We're going to do new objects. So when we launched, we only had contact level syncing in April of last year when we launched Operations Hub. So you could sync people, but you couldn't sync anything else. Since then, we've launched deals and we've launched companies. So if you're syncing a CRM with HubSpot and you want to get all your opportunity data over into HubSpot or vice versa, you can now sync companies and deals. We're working this year on even more objects to sync. And I think the next ones in line are commerce related ones. So products, line items, that kind of thing. We'll move into tickets. Eventually we'll get to custom objects and you'll be able to set up a real full-fledged bidirectional sync of all your objects between HubSpot and these other systems. And then the last piece is even more integrations. So when we launched last year, there were 20 of these new integrations between HubSpot and other tools that were powered by this former PieSync engine that we now call Datasync. There were 20 last year. We're over 100 now. Just even less than a year later, we've quintupled the number of integrations that we have. And we're going to continue to grow that with customer requests. So Datasync is super cool. I think I have, some use cases here. It's all about integration. So if you have several apps in your tech stack, if you need to migrate from another system to HubSpot, if you're new to HubSpot, or you just have another system that you're trying to get rid of and you want to get that data in, often we have people who are building integrations from scratch or paying a lot of money to set up a custom integration with a Dynamics or something similar. The max you're going to pay for this feature in Ops Hub is $50 a month. A lot of people are paying much more than that for custom integrations with some of these tools. So those are the kind of symptoms. So you might use this sync feature to pull in deals, pull in MQLs to do better personalization and better segmentation in HubSpot based on external CRM data. So if you have Dynamics set up, you have Zoho set up, you have Sugar set up, you have a third-party CRM set up, and you do your marketing from HubSpot, you could use Sync to bring that over. Sync contacts from Intercom to HubSpot. So a lot of point solutions in various spaces like Intercom for customer service. Zendesk and customer service, Pardot and Marketo for marketing, outreach, several sales tools, syncing contacts just to HubSpot from those systems to make sure you have the kind of closed loop and all the visibility for all the teams. We also have some billing systems hooked up. So Stripe is one of the integrations. Xero is one of the integrations. So if you want to get billing information and customer information in, so you can send, customer welcome emails, that kind of thing in HubSpot, you can do that as well. So that's the first P, that's platform. It's all about connecting data. It's a new set of integrations built on this awesome engine that we pulled over from PySync a couple of years ago. Our customers are generally loving this. This is Benjamin. He set it up via HubSpot and Dynamics. It saved him having to set up a third-party tool to make that sync, and it saves the marketing and the sales team a lot of time that they used to spend either chasing each other down or doing a bunch of imports and exports between the systems to get the data to talk to each other. I'm really going to quickly just going to situate you in the tool so you have a sense of where to find this later on. All right, so I'm in my HubSpot account. Y'all can see my screen, right? Yep, nice. So I'm in my HubSpot account. Nicole says yes, thanks, Nicole. The way that I find these integrations is through the marketplace. So if I click on the upper right here and I click into the app marketplace, all of the integrations through HubSpot live in the app marketplace. We're over 1,000 total integrations, of which 100 plus of them are built by HubSpot with this new framework. So there's over 1,000 here. You search for whatever you want here, whatever app you're looking for. If you want to just peruse a collection of these awesome new integrations built through Datasync, there's a collection over on the left that you can see, Datasync built by HubSpot. And you can take a look. We have 101 of all the different varieties that I just mentioned. That's where you find them. Once you have one set up, I'll show you what the inside of one looks like. Go into my connected apps. I already actually set up the Google Contact Sync, which is a pretty straightforward one. The really cool thing about these is that if you've set one up, then you know how to set them all up because they all look exactly the same on the inside. So I just came into my Google Contact Sync, came into my settings. I've only set up the Contact Sync. I don't have deals. Obviously, Google Contacts doesn't have deals or companies. I'm going to go in and look at the sync settings. And this is what, if we kind of pull up a microscope, this is what the inside looks like. So it's pretty straightforward. There are two screens on the inside of one of these integrations. The first screen, you're just deciding which records you want to sync between the systems. So in this case, I have a label in Google Contacts called Awesome People. Only people who are awesome are going to come from Google Contacts into HubSpot. I've set it up to bidirectionally sync. I could swap that to be just a one-way sync if I only want data into HubSpot or out. And then I could do a filter from the HubSpot side as well. So if I only want certain folks to go from HubSpot into Google Contacts, I could do that based on a list membership in any list that I've created in HubSpot. So that's the first piece. A couple other settings here that I won't go through. The second piece is customizing mapping. So for folks who maybe have set up a Salesforce connector before, this might look familiar. You're mapping data from one system to the other. This is not the sexiest part of the tool, but I think it's the most functional. On the left, your Google Contacts, your third-party data source. On the right is your HubSpot field. And you can just toggle them on and off and change some of the settings about which system wins from here. So first name, last name, email. The one piece of paid functionality here that's in the $50 tier, that starter tier of Operations Hub, is customizing these mappings. So the kind of out-of-the-box stuff you see here, this is Google Contacts. So we got the first name, last name, job title, email, all the default properties that exist in Google Contacts. That's all completely free. You never have to pay for that. If you created something custom in Google or in HubSpot and you wanted to map that between systems, that would be $50 a month, and you would take it from there. So one thing I would encourage you to do is check out, like, even if you don't pay for Operations Hub, you have no interest in paying for Operations Hub, go check out the marketplace. See if there's an integration that you didn't realize existed that we built that you might want to set up, and at least set up the free version of it, test it out, see what you think. Worst case, you'll learn something new. Best case, you're going to have more connectivity between your data and alignment between your teams. So that's Datasync. quick breath, pause. Let's open up the chat again. It's been a little quiet in there. What's at the top of your integration wish list? Curious to know for folks who have been around HubSpot for a long time, or maybe folks who haven't. Is there like, what's your magic wand request that if you could integrate one thing with HubSpot, what would it be? Maybe we have it, maybe we don't. But if we don't, I'll take it to the product team and see if they'll build it. Drop your answer in the chat. Ooh, Chelsea, this sounds like something we should get on a call and chat through in our own time. That's a really good question. I don't know off the top of my head. It could be something around like the deduplication around company domain. But without seeing the specific example, it's hard to know. That's the first time I've heard it that specifically happening. So it's yeah. One thing I should mention actually as we go, I'm going to drop my email address in here. Pretty straightforward. So Chelsea, if you want to follow up with me on that, we can talk through it. If other folks have questions or want to follow up with me, that's where to find me.
Hey, Ari,
What
I'm
else?
curious.
Let's get another answer.
While people are thinking in the chat, do you have any insight on like what are some of the most popular integrations that that people use with HubSpot?
Yeah, it's a really good question. With the data sync stuff specifically, there's a couple like buckets of integrations that are super popular. I think the kind of contact database like Google Contacts, Outlook Contacts, often that's for a smaller company just wanting to keep their databases in sync, or it's sometimes in a field sales use case where there's like a sales rep out on the road who just wants to make sure that their Android, their phone contacts stay in touch with the CRM. So I think that's a popular bucket. That's a big one. It's in the free version of the tools, and oftentimes people are using HubSpot for a CRM, and then they're using other like kind of beginning marketing tools like a MailChimp. So things like MailChimp are very popular as well, where you could just sync your HubSpot CRM with your MailChimp contacts so that your contact databases and your email stayed in line and your segmentation stayed up to date. So I think those are the big ones. But there's a long tail. Like we have over 100 now, and they're all like pretty solidly used. So
yeah, I know we probably have some mostly like B2B companies on the line too. I know probably some of them use Salesforce. So that's a common one we run into also.
Totally. CRM use case is also big. So we have a Salesforce integration, Sugar, Zoho, Pipedrive. There's a bunch of CRMs that you can sync with HubSpot. Even a lot of people use HubSpot as a CRM, but if you don't and you just use it for marketing, this is a great way to hook up the CRM to HubSpot to make sure they stay online. That's a great one.
Yeah, I think a lot of our experience with clients has been if they're already using Salesforce as their sales like pipeline tool, but we're trying to do sales enablement work and get them to use the contact timeline data for context and relevancy and the sales documents library and all that. That's a great way to get the sales team to actually use it.
HubSpot for sure. Yeah, that's a great shout. Reed says Microsoft Teams. We actually have I believe we have a beta integration right now with Microsoft Teams. So yeah, Reed, shoot me an email and I'll see what I can find for you. That's a good shout. What else? Any other integration wish lists or integration questions as we go? Seems like you guys are more passionate about attending games at Lambeau Field than about setting up CRM integration, which I totally understand.
I think the main message that I'm hearing, Ari, is if it's something that you wanted to sync with HubSpot before and you couldn't, or you weren't sure if you could, now with Ops Hub, you probably can.
That I couldn't have put it better myself. Yeah. It's the world of integrations has been, the kind of box has been blown open in terms of what's possible to integrate. So yeah, go back into the integration marketplace, the app marketplace, do a search or peruse that collection of data sync and take a look.
Stacy in the chat
Yes.
asked about Goldmine CRM.
Yes. I don't think that we have Goldmine CRM. I'm actually not familiar. Kelly and Mary, are you familiar with Goldmine CRM? I haven't actually used that before. I don't think it's on our list right now, but I could triple check.
I'm not familiar, no.
Yeah, I would say Goldmine's the list, but we're expanding quickly. I said we've gone from 20 to 100. So as we get the next 100, we can add that to our list. Second P is process. That first P was platform. It's all about connecting data. Process is what I think of as flexible, advanced business automation. So whereas in Marketing Hub, you could do automate a marketing campaign, automate a marketing email or an ad or a social post, whatever it is. In Ops Hub, you really kind of blow open the box in terms of flexibility with automation. And there's a couple of features that enable that. The first one is custom code actions. I'll show you this in a second. In workflows, you can now, the way that I think about this is previously there was a menu of things that you could choose from to automate in HubSpot. It was finite. So if you didn't see what you wanted to automate, you're kind of out of luck. With custom code actions, with just a few lines of code, JavaScript, Python, you can build your own Lego blocks in workflows. You can automate anything that you want. So that's really powerful. Doesn't mean much unless you actually see what it's being used for. So we've seen a ton of cool use cases come up for this. We've seen data management come up as a good use case, deleting data, deduplicating data, associating objects together, merging contacts, merging records. We've seen advanced lead rotation. So for the folks who are in B2B, have an inside sales motion, you can run lead rotation through another hub, but in a much more simplistic form. So an example, an Ops Hub that might make it even more flexible is I talked to a customer the other day who wanted to do lead rotation by looking up in a third-party database of zip codes, looking up a zip code, mapping it then to a territory, bringing that back into HubSpot, and then matching that up against sales rep capacity. So there's a certain set of sales reps who are owning a certain territory. Whichever one has the most availability, you then assign the lead to. So that kind of lead rotation or process management where you're pinging third-party systems and running custom logic in order to make something happen is really well suited for Ops Hub and this custom code action. Data enrichment, we've seen it for a real estate company. I saw it, somebody pulled from the Zillow API, a lot of folks using Clearbit and ZoomInfo. You can set up a workflow for certain records, like certain leads, certain deals, whatever it is, come through, ping a third-party system, pull back a certain piece of information, and update the HubSpot data with that enriched information. Zillow, Clearbit, whatever it might be. And there's a whole lot more. We actually are putting together a use case library for folks who want to just explore this. Looks like this. It's growing every day. So these are the kinds of things that are possible. I won't go through every one, but there's data formatting, there's associations between records, and creation of records. There's email validation is a good one. So if you have a third-party service like a Kickbox, where you want to pull in HubSpot records, and when a HubSpot record is created, ping Kickbox, see if it's a real email address, pull that back into HubSpot, and create a property that shows whether it's a valid email. You can do that, and so on and so forth. So really, as flexible as they come here. I think my favorite use case, question from Greg. Will the use case library be organized by categories or verticals? The answer to that is definitely yes, Greg. I think it's at HubSpot with both marketing stuff and product stuff, we like to launch MVPs, and then based on feedback, iterate from there. So right now it's a laundry list. It started as 2, now there's like 30. We're definitely going to sort it in a more meaningful way coming up. So yeah, if you have ideas on that or additional use cases you'd like to see, email me and we can see about getting them added. Kelly asked, will the custom code actions work with just contact objects or all objects? It's all objects. So that action can be added to a workflow of any object type. So, the example we just saw with rotation, you might want to rotate deals, not leads. So you could rotate deals, you could rotate, quote workflow, ticket workflow, any kind of workflow could have that kind of a step. Yep. Oops. My favorite idea, we've seen a lot of really creative stuff come out of this. So my favorite idea, the light bulb example here, was a customer I talked to. Their support team took lunch like at noon, and sometimes they would get important tickets that came in during the lunch hour, and they would want their support team, who was sitting close by, to know that a ticket came in and that they had to go back and take it. So they automated, they had like a smart light bulb in the support room, and they automated the light to flash when a high value ticket came in, like a ticket of a certain type or from a certain size of company. They automated the light to flash red so the support team would know to come back. The essential answer is, if anything has an API, you can automate it through these new actions. So I talked to somebody who, I think they automated, like when a big deal got closed, they delivered a pizza through the Domino's API to the sales rep that closed the deal. Talked to somebody who like would automate a Spotify event, like they could play a certain song when a certain type of deal came in. The world's our oyster here in terms of possibilities with automation in HubSpot with this coded action. Customers love it. Connor's a good example. We'll skip through that. One thing to remember here, code feels very, like it doesn't feel approachable off the bat. I'm not a coder myself, but one thing to just remind you and remember here is that we have that use case library. It's got code samples. A lot of those are just copy and paste. You can take them and understand them well enough to hack a little bit on your own and copy paste them into your workflows. HubSpot offers services around this. HubSpot's partners offer services around this. HubSpot customers are doing a lot of this stuff on their own and together. So if you do have an automation question or an automation need, don't feel like the code is beyond your reach. It can actually be pretty straightforward if you work with the right people. A couple of other workflow actions that are part of the second P, that process piece of Operations Hub. One is scheduled workflow triggers. So workflows are elaborate kind of if-then statements. If a certain trigger happens, then execute a certain set of actions. Those triggers have always been dynamic. Something specific has always had to happen in order to trigger a workflow. Like a contact fills out a form, a certain property specifically gets updated, something like that. With these new scheduled triggers, it's recurring on a regular cadence, a regular schedule. So instead of a dynamic trigger, it could be, you can see here the example. It's weekly on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's on the first of the month every month, or the last of the month. It's on the first week of the quarter. You might send something out. The use cases here, and the reason this is an Operations Hub, is most often these are operational kind of internal process automation that happens through this type of a recurring trigger, whether it be task creation, whether it be data cleanup, whether it be a custom integration where you want to ping data to a certain place on a regular basis. One marketing example we've seen here is email newsletters. So for folks who are working, this may be a more B2C use case in retail, in real estate, but if you want to send a newsletter every week that pulls new information, maybe product recommendations, updated real estate listings, that kind of thing, and you don't want to have to schedule that newsletter every week on your own and create the content every time, you just want it to go on a recurring basis, these scheduled workflow triggers would allow you to do that. So that's another piece, is scheduled workflow triggers. The last automation piece in Operations Hub is what we call data quality automation. And that's a new action in a workflow that formats data. So the traditional actions in workflows are like send an email, right? We've never had anything that's related to the quality of data until now. So we have this data quality action, this format data action, can format strings of text, can update date properties, format, can do some simple arithmetic, can remove white space from before and after text, like a lot of stuff that you can do and only growing. Really quickly, I'm mindful of time and that I've already gone way over the 20 minutes that I promised. Just going to show you where this lives in HubSpot so you can explore it yourself. I came into workflows, which live in automation and workflows. All I've set up here is the trigger, that if statement of my workflow is that a contact has a first or a last name. So if they have a first or a last name, they get enrolled in this. And then this is going to trigger on Fridays at 9 p.m. So it's my end of week data cleanup project. All this is going to do is it's going to format data. So this is that new action that I just talked about. Oops. I don't have permission. Let me request a quick permission. Permissions issues on demos. Take my word for it. Won't waste time on it here today, but there's this format data action. When you go to choose your action in a workflow, instead of choosing send an email or something that you're used to, you choose to capitalize the first name, choose to capitalize the last name, and then the only other piece here is once we capitalize that, we just have to reinsert it right back into the property it came from. So you see this copy property value here. We capitalize the first name. Now we're going to stick it right back into the first name property with that new value. So this is the type of thing, if you've used Zapier before, Zapier has a function called, I think it's called Formatter, that they have for cleaning up data. And this is a similar function. So that's data quality automation. The other piece to show off here, well, looks like I won't be able to because of the permission stuff. The other piece is, in addition to that format action, there's one that's just called custom code. So if you want to experiment with the light bulb example or with the pizza example or the Spotify or then the actual examples, you could do that within the custom code action. All right, we're going to open up the chat one more time for this process piece while I plug in my computer before the last quick section. Another kind of magic wand moment. What's one process you've always wanted to automate? Sounds like one of them could be automating the delivery of beer to the parking lot at Lambeau Field 3 hours before the game. That could certainly be automated with HubSpot as long as your liquor store has an open API. What else? Drop it in the chat. I'm just plugging in my computer here. All right, as we go, Kelly has a question. Have you heard of InCycle for data and CRM cleansing? Curious if HubSpot does some similar things. Yes, I have heard of InCycle. InCycle is awesome. InCycle does really cool things. I would say that HubSpot Operations Hub does some similar things. Yes, I think for some simpler use cases, Operations Hub could fill that gap. I think that InCycle goes much deeper, and I think that's the case for a lot of comparisons between HubSpot and point solutions. So HubSpot does maybe 40 or 50, 60% of the functionality, but keeps it all in the CRM, keeps it all in one place. InCycle would take you deeper, you'd get more, it would live outside of HubSpot, and there are pros and cons of that. So, but yeah, similar kind of category of tools between HubSpot and InCycle in terms of that data quality stuff. All right, anybody with a process they've always wanted to automate, a wish list item? It's talking about sending a blog notification based on the blog tag and the leads noticed interest. Yeah, you could definitely do that here. Yep, so you could just like, if you can kind of logic it out in your head, yeah, you'd pull folks from the list, that's the blog notification list, and the leads noted interest. Yeah, so if you store that, depends where you store that interest, Mary. Like if that's on the contact record and they filled out a form or something where you're noting their interests along the way, or it's a certain page that they viewed, yeah, you should definitely be able to trigger that. Oh, yay, says Chelsea. Oh, I love that Bevy enables emojis. And so I feel like Zoom, yeah, it was like Zoom doesn't exactly, right? So it's one thing, this Bevy platform is pretty awesome. Could you store that in a subscription type? Yeah, I think you probably could, right? Well, yeah, I guess it depends if you want people to actually subscribe and be able to unsubscribe from those specific like blog categories, or whether you want it just to be like a preference thing of what you send them over time. Let's see. Greg says personalized reminders to anyone behind on work time entry. Yeah, you could. I think the only key, like the got a lot of thumbs down, Greg, from folks behind on work time entry. For you, Greg, don't tell him. He's just being snarky. Yeah. Somehow Greg stuck around for 11 years. Even with this level of snark. I appreciate it, Greg. It's the right way to start the morning. You wouldn't read it anyways. Talk about how often this syncs, real time, daily. So these automations that you set up trigger whenever you want them to. That's a good question from Megan. So you could do this recurring trigger that does it like once a month, once a week, whatever it is, or you could base it on a certain thing happening in HubSpot, like when a certain type of content gets created, or in Mary's example, or in Kelly's example, when a certain blog subscription preference is met, then you would enroll them through this workflow and send them a certain email. So it really, if a workflow can trigger based on any cadence, these kinds of coded actions can trigger as well. All right, in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to the last P, perspective. Ops Hub I think of as a kind of turbo boost for reporting in HubSpot. So it both adds capability and it also adds ease for everybody who does reports in HubSpot. So there's two things specifically that Ops Hub adds, and they're both in this product called Datasets, which is new. One is it enables calculations in the context of reports. So you can do some calculations in properties in HubSpot, like in CRM properties, but they're a little bit limited and they always have to live on a CRM record. So if you don't want that to live permanently and you don't want it to be something that reps see, on the CRM layout, you've never been able to just run a calculation for a single report. Until now, you can. So that's one piece of it, is calculations. The other piece is curation. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. But the idea is that it makes it easier for the average user to build reports inside of HubSpot. So the way that I visualize this from a high level is, in general, when you're starting in HubSpot or in any other CRM, you're using just the raw data in the CRM to create a report. You're starting from scratch. You have to go through and pick out all the different properties and pick out all the objects and do the right joins in order to get to that report. The idea with Datasets is that somebody, whether it's an ops person, a partner agency, just a data expert on the team, can curate and narrow down the available data into a smaller data set that then everybody else can use to build a report from that starting point. So nobody has to start from scratch. You just use the data set that's relevant to you and to your team. That's the curated set of things that you need to build reports. So from a high level, that's what a data set is. The use cases here, it's all about calculations, right? So Kelly asked, can you use this to calculate things like the number of days between MQL and SQL? Yes, you 100% can do that. Commissions, margins, ROI, we've seen that. So if there's anything like a partner commission or a sales rep commission where you need to multiply a deal amount, for example, by 15%, or a margin or an ROI, you can do that. Custom date reporting, so that's the example Kelly sent. There's a date difference function in Datasets where you could just subtract two dates. That could be MQL to SQL, it could be deal stages, it could be from their create date until their first conversion date or their recent conversion date. You could take that as a date difference and report on that. But all kinds of things that the possibilities are endless in terms of data calculations within Datasets. And I'll just show you one example here. This is actually from the reports that I run within 53, which is our own HubSpot portal. That's our Hub ID. The before scene here is this is what our actual data selection looked like when I was building a report. It had a whole bunch of do not use, RPG only. These are things that over 12 years just add up. We have 812 properties. A lot of them have confusing names. The after is that our ops team built us these data sets, and I have 3 fields that are meaningful to me for Operations Hub that I can build my own reports. MRR, ARR, close date. One of those, which I'll show you in a second, that ARR property is calculated based on the MRR property. So even additional context with those calculations, and then the curation piece where it's that much easier to build reports. Really quickly, just going to show you what this looks like inside of HubSpot, again, just to kind of situate you. I'm going to take us out of here for a second. I'm going to show you what it looks like to build a report without a data set, and then I'll show you quickly what the data set looks like. So if I go into build a report, I just came into reports and then reports. I create a custom report. This is what I'm met with. So me as a normal human and a marketer, I'm not super data savvy. I don't totally know where to start, right? I have to go through and define my primary data source. I have to pick my objects as I go through. Even once I get started, I'm met with that screen of all the different properties that I might want to report on, right? Some of them feel the same. I'm not sure exactly which one is which. There's friction here for me as a marketer, for a sales rep, for a sales manager, people downstream who are trying to create reports. The alternative to this is that when I create a report in HubSpot, I don't go through the data source selection and all the fields. I just go to my data set. This is a data set that's been pre-created. And when I start with that, I only have the things that are relevant to me, the specific properties, and an additional property that's been created for me by my data team. That's a calculation based on some of the other properties. So from a high level, that's the pitch for data sets. It's about curation, and it's about that additional power of calculations. Really quickly, just going to show you how this, like how to make one of these to kind of get started. If you go into reports and you go into data sets, I'll show you what that's already created. The builder actually looks pretty similar. So all we're doing here is we're selecting the properties that we want to show up. This is the back end of the data set that we just looked at. We selected the properties. In this case, this MRR property used to be called amount. That's the deal amount property. But in the context of reports, I want it to be called MRR. So one of the nice things you can do in these data sets is change the names of properties as they would appear on reports. In this case, I want it to be MRR. And then the other key piece I wanted to show you is just what that calculation looks like. So in this case, for ARR, I just did MRR times 12. That's a super simplified version. But the cool thing that you can do here, this is almost like Excel, is the way that I think about it. Kelly, you had asked about date differences. Here's the date difference function. So you could do weeks, days, months in between two dates. A lot of the things you might be used to from Excel, you can concatenate strings together. You might do that for first name and last name on a report. You might do that for, like, oftentimes people will want the company name and the deal name concatenated on a report, so they could see those two things together. One powerful one is the if function that actually just went into beta in the last few days. So the way you might use that if function is to bucket or categorize data together. So let's say you have, like, at HubSpot, we bucket our deals by size. So if it's under a certain amount, it's like a small deal. If it's between, 5,000 and 15,000, it's a medium deal. And if it's over 15,000, it's a big deal. So you could use this if function to create those buckets within a report, those categories of information. All kinds of things that you can do here. I won't go through all of them, but from a high level, I kind of just think about this like Excel within HubSpot, and a lot of the spreadsheet functions you're used to can now live in a HubSpot report. So that's the quick down and dirty on data sets. It curates the fields so that everybody downstream can use them more easily, and it adds this additional power of the formulas, of the if functions, of date differences, and any kind of calculation you want to run only in the context of a report without bogging down the CRM with that additional information. All right, questions on that? I have another wish list question here about what wish list of a report you'd like to run. But are there questions about the calculations? Kelly, that was a really good one about days between MQL and SQL. Are there other questions about data sets? Any reports we'd like to run or calculations we'd like to see? Or comments about, I'll take snarky comments from Greg, or opinions on Aaron Rodgers, or anything else, or complaints that we haven't had a coffee break. Often hear those towards the end of a presentation. What else? Oh, Kelly, good question. Very timely question. Are there plans to have a datasets library like the code library? The answer is yes, definitely. I think it's a little bit like I'm giving you the inside sneak peek world of what a product marketer's life is at HubSpot. It's a little bit of a chicken or an egg problem in terms of the use case library, where like in order to have a use case library, you need to have people using it, right? And showing you how they're using it and what they're building with it. And then at the same time, in order to get people using it, you need a use case library to give them ideas of what to build, right? So we're kind of in that a little bit of a limbo time where we launched it. We have some early adopters using it, building really cool things. And I think we're on the verge of having enough to go off of to build that use case library. But from a high level, yes, we're going to have a library. We're going to have resources and marketing resources and academy content around data sets examples. That's a really good question. I'm going to zoom out actually, just as we wrap things up. I'm mindful of time. The pricing is here. We can send out the deck. You can look at the pricing page. It starts for free, like all products do. Starter is $50 a month. That's the more custom integrations. And then as you get into the coded automation and the data quality stuff we looked at, the scheduled workflow triggers on the recurring basis, then you get to the professional tier at $800 a month. One other thing to point out for folks who aren't aware, we have a suite pricing discount. So if you buy the whole suite, you get all the different hubs together, you get a built-in discount, which I think ends up being like, I think it's like all the hubs for the cost of maybe 2 of the hubs, something like that, if you buy them all together. And with that, I'm going to wrap because I've already talked way too much, but I wanted to open it up about questions about anything at all. James says, thanks. James, thanks for coming. We appreciate you. Any other questions? I'll open it up. Mary and Kelly, also any questions from you as we go? Thank you very much all for your time. It's been really fun.
I don't have any questions, but I put myself at a 2 on the scale, and now I can definitely move myself up as a lot more confident with Operations Hub. So thanks for all the information, and especially thanks for driving us through some of those so that we can see them in action. It was really helpful.
Yeah, for sure. You all know where to find me now. Sharing my email address is perhaps a bold move. I open myself to Patriots hate, to Greg snark. But yeah, any and all questions can come through there as well. But thank you, Mary and Kelly, for having me.
Yes.
Thanks, Ari. Yeah, the concrete examples are really helpful for us to get an idea of how it could be used. So thank you.
And I'll be sending out the recording of the meeting along with the deck and Ari's email, so you can all bug in with more questions. Okay, I think that wraps up our hug for this month. We'll have another one in June, and we'll be in touch with those dates as it's scheduled.
Thanks, Ari. Thanks, Mary.
Thanks, team. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.